All right, so I'm here with Anthony David Vernon, right?
Yep,
And
that's me.
I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. Could you just tell me? All right, I do know you're a professor at two South Florida universities, and or adjunct professor.
Yes.
And then you're also. Can you just tell me your academic? I think you have what, a bachelor's in history and a
I have a
master's in
bachelor's in
philosophy.
history and a master's in philosophy. That's correct. And then I do a lot of literary writing. That's the majority of my published stuff.
Right.
So I have like casual essays on like articles and blogs in philosophy, but no, no like, journal articles or anything like that. But I do have like poetry here, there, everywhere. So yeah, it is kind of funny when it's like, oh, so, what sort of published stuff do you have? I'm like, here's like a haiku. So it's kind of funny in that regard, but I like being in that space. It's fun, I think, to mix the sort of overheadiness with the creativeness,
Yeah.
especially even a lot of my academic work is on Kendrick Lamar, so
Oh,
which
that's
makes it even
fire.
funnier.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I will say, like, I do have some maybe like controversial opinions on poetry a little bit, just
Ooh, go
because
off.
I'm actually like a rapper. I do like rap battling and stuff. So I don't know if you're familiar with like flighting. It's probably
Of
like
course.
flighting back in like the 1600s. I'm just gonna tell you know, but other people I'm gonna just put them on. Back I don't know, back in the middle medieval times, like poets would actually get together and like insult each other through poems, and they would try to be witty and clever with puns and stuff. And that's basically what rap battling is today. So that still exists. It's a fucking wonderful universe. But yeah, I will move on from that.
No, no, no. I mean, I think there is something to that. I think a lot of times people ignore the sophistication of rap and hip hop and like how deep the tradition runs, that it's an extension of spoken word, not an alteration of it. I mean, one of the reasons I think hip hop often gets missed, and I think there's twofold reasons for it. One, because of the culture it's largely associated with, i.e., African American, Black American culture.
Right.
And number two, because thanks to P. Diddy, who's horrible in many ways. But one other impact he had on hip hop was the fact that he sold out hip hop. He made hip hop kind of a commercial genre, and that kind of transformed hip hop from, kind of Grandmaster Flash, turned hip hop away from any, sense of consciousness that it was developing into like a for sure corporate genre. Because before that, right, there was some debate here, right? Like Rappin' Duke was a, kind of good example of like trying to corporatize hip hop. But
Right.
P. Diddy like kind of like set it in stone for a long time. And it took us a while to get conscious hip hop as being like, a big part of hip hop as opposed to like a more under like Mos Step and Lupe Fiasco.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just double check one thing before we get rolling. I just want to make sure I was like on my router extender, hoping I don't have any internet connection problems. So while we're on the topic of hip hop, then I might push back a little bit. I'm not, I'm interested to hear what your perspective is. But why would you maybe like attribute that to Diddy of all people? Like I could think of a lot of people who might contribute. Eminem being one of them, which is not necessarily because like the thing is the reality is that because he is white, that did allow him to expand to a
Yes.
larger demographic, and then that made like hip hop more popular, and that like brought more income into hip hop. And I always I kind of have like I have kind of debates sometimes. You can listen to my other podcast, one with Archduke Red Cat, I believe. We kind of touch on it a little bit, but like there is a little bit of a back and forth about like whether rap battling really wants to like ever get to the level of mainstream that like hip hop and rap music does, because there's a lot of people who just feel like, it's really nice the way that it is, and we don't
Yeah.
necessarily want like an influx of. I mean, there are already a lot of white people in rap battling, but like we don't necessarily need more, and it's just like there's something about like the culture of it, which like actually personifies like and especially when you talk about URL, it personifies like street culture of like not like being in a low income area, and like often like you have a lot of people that like glorify to some extent like being gang members, and there's a level like in rap battling. It's well, you have to kind of actually be the person that you are rapping as. So if I go out there and I rap about guns, but I don't really like, I don't have a set, I'm not a blood, I'm not a crip, nobody knows who I am, and I'm not doing, or I can't go out there and rap about drugs, because like if I was rapping about drugs, people would know who I am, at least
Yeah.
locally to me and all that. So there is a very like real emphasis on authenticity in terms of like being from that culture, right? It's not just authenticity. If you're there is acceptance. Rap battling is a very interesting like niche, I think. There are definitely many white like nerdy people. I'm definitely somewhere on the spectrum of nerdy whiteness, obviously, and so just like there is an acceptance for that. But I think more often than not, they do prefer that you do be genuine and authentic to whoever you are. If you're a nerdy looking white guy, they especially the URL like street crowds don't really want you to rap about guns and stuff. There's always like how you rap and stuff. There's always a way to like make yourself seem more believable than you actually are. There are some incredible rappers and battlers when you look at all their technique and everything, but when you look at the person, they're not about that life at all. But yeah, I don't know, I feel like I'm going on a tangent a little
No, no,
bit.
no. It's a good tangent because there's a lot of good points there, right? Like the point you brought up about like Eminem mainstreaming hip hop due to being a sellable figure, due to cultural preferences towards whiteness, not just due to just being the majority, but also due to just like whiteness seen as like the symbol of like respectability, properness. Yes, like of course that also played a factor. And it's not to say that, mainstreaming of hip hop took away all of its consciousness, or, that like the fact that there was these battles of consciousness versus mainstreaming, that like there was only one type of music that exists. To me, I mark P. Diddy as a nail in the coffin of sorts, where the majority of hip hop was kind of the mainstream for the pop, for the image, because he was really the first like blatant corporate marketer of hip hop, right? That doesn't to say that there weren't past rappers that weren't good at marketing. I mean, NWA was fantastic at marketing. It didn't seem as like intentional though, right? It was an authentic. And really what P. Diddy does is he kind of puts the nail in the coffin on the authenticity of hip hop, selling an image, selling brands, selling, sort of rappers as IPs, right? You could see him doing this a lot with, Biggie kind of being like Biggie's kind of spokesperson, right? Because Biggie was, again, this nerdy dude. He raps about like the Sega Genesis. He's quiet, right? And so, Puff Daddy helps him craft this sort of image, right? And so hip hop moves away from the person into the persona, right? That's the shift. Yes, rappers have had personas before, but it's this sort of sense where it's like there's a period that spurred by Diddy was spurred more by the persona rather than the person. And it seems recently, very recently, I would say like within the last 5 years, that we're seeing a kind of pushback against persona back to person, right? You see kind of the rise of individuals like Mick Jenkins, having some stability, in the game. You see kind of the death of SoundCloud rap, like those sort of little whatevers who, would just kind of sell an image, right? Like a guy like Lil Tecca, who clearly had not done anything he was rapping about. So there is this return, to authenticity. And kind of away from corporate hip hop, especially as from like a mainstream level, hip hop moves down the sort of listening rankings and is being, I believe it's now overtaken by country
Yeah, I was
and
thinking
rock
country
now. But I think
and rock.
country's now, yeah, rock is weird. Rock always holds up somehow. I don't know
Right.
how, but it does.
I
I'll
gotta
go
be
proof.
honest. I did not see the resurgence of country happening, and this like so. I grew up. My mom listened to country. I'm from Florida, right? Like I'm not from Tampa. Well, I'm actually from St.
Yeah, I know
Petersburg. If
St.
you're
Pete. Yeah,
familiar.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Not everybody knows St. Pete. Sometimes I tell them, they're like, "Huh?"
It's
And
where
then
the
I just
Dolly
gotta. Yeah,
Museum
we're
is.
by
It's where the
Tampa. We're
Rays
like,
used to
yeah.
play.
But either way, so like I'm from Florida, and I lost my train of thought. Where were we talking about? What were we talking about?
Yeah, the hip hop stuff, the sort of re-mainstreaming, the authenticity coming kind of back in the last 5 years.
Well, I was trying to figure out where like what that connected to me being from Florida. I see. This is. I was gonna preface this. You kind of blindsided me a little bit by going on to a tangent about hip hop, which I love. Don't get me
Yeah, well,
wrong.
the fact that you love hip hop, I'm like, this is a great thing to talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. It did surprise me a little bit because I listened to like several of your other podcasts, and obviously that never gets touched on.
Yeah, because this is my problem with it though, where it's like I wish that more spaces were acceptable of hip hop as like intelligent, as culture. It's something I bring up
Right.
in my lectures. Like I will lecture using Kendrick Lamar. I will lecture using J. Cole. I will lecture, using hip hop in my classes. A lot newer stuff, of course, because one, I think it's more, relatable. Like I try to be relatable with it as much as, I'd love to reference. I do actually reference the most underground person I've referenced in a class is Little Darky. So I have used Little Darky as an
Mhm.
example.
Not. I'm not even familiar to be honest with you. Um,
Indian American guy who raps technically in multiple genres.
right.
But yeah, he'll go from like metal rap. He's done a couple parody country songs on his new album. Almost making fun of that rise of country that you were
Yeah,
blindsided
that
by.
really I think was what I wanted to talk
That's
about a
what you
little
wanted to
bit.
talk about.
The rise of country because that like kind of baffled me a little bit. The rise of mullets and the mustache. Like I did not see either of those coming back. And like obviously I think that's all related a little bit to the Trump like era and like kind of like the image of MAGA and such.
Yeah, of course,
But
it's
the
the rise
rise of
of
country.
conservatism.
Yeah, I grew
Conservatism,
up.
yeah.
What I was saying was like I grew up in Florida. My mom loved country music. She, fancied herself as like a southern, type of person. So, like that was very much like the environment I grew up in. It wasn't. I don't know. I never like St. Pete is a little bit more liberal than some other areas of Florida, especially if you get into like, the middle, like of the, not the south, not the like the north, where, just like somewhere in the middle, like, it does sometimes get a little bit like rednecky and like very like into the rural areas of it. But yeah, there was still some level of, sorry, there was some level of expectation that, I don't know. It's like my mom was just very into like country. This idea. I grew up kind of like seeing this world, right? And I think about this sometimes. It's like the differences of masculinity too, where it's just like I grew up with this. Okay, well, there were cowboys. Cowboys were depicted obviously in a positive light, and these were like noble men. They like they were very masculine and strong, but very contrary to the quote unquote alphas of today's kind of genre. I think that a lot of the ones that like when I listen to country music, the way they were depicted is that they still had some level of emotional
Oh
intelligence.
yeah.
They still had they were just like good noble people. They wanted to do right. Like these were people who like these were men who went to church. That was a founding like part of their like identity. And like so this like type of masculinity I don't think exists anymore in like the mainstream MAGA like kind of circuits. I'm just postulating
Yeah.
here.
No, I think you're onto something. I think there's a couple areas I want to build off. I think one, this is one of the flaws of conservatism is that you can never go fully back, right? That like every conservatism is a neoconservatism, right? Going even away from the noble person, which I want to get back to, a lot of today's country music is inspired by hip hop, with the most obvious example being Post Malone, right?
Right.
Post Malone being the hip hop artist to transition into, country, right? Shabuzi, right? Doing country interpolations of rap songs, right?
Right.
And so hip hop and rap had an influence on the new wave of country, right? A lot of the people who are listening to country now, were in elementary or middle school or high school listening to hip hop, right? Listening to Lil Wayne, probably most prominently. And so, yeah, there's that sense of conservatism is a neoconservatism every single time because one can never fully recapture the past. that image of like the noble person with emotions. I mean, the song that comes to mind for me is Amarillo by Morning, right? Where, he lost his, wife and a girlfriend somewhere along the way. He's reminiscing, right? They don't paint themselves as perfect individuals. They paint themselves as working men. They paint themselves as just the vaqueros, right? The people who are
Right.
just doing the job, traveling along, right? And that's
Right.
the other thing that's interesting about country music. So much of it comes from a Mexicano tradition, right? So even this thing that seems so American, right? The idea of the cowboy is also the vaquero simultaneously. So it's this
Right.
sort of interesting thing of that, like even the things that are perceived as the most American have some sort of other capture,
I
and yeah,
mean,
and
the first thing when I think of American is like, like hot dogs and hamburgers, but those are also like from like European countries that like, I don't know, hot dogs are what, German or something? I
I
don't
don't
know.
know about hot dogs, but and
Like both of them, I think are like, some
there's some
European countries.
disputed history on that, but at least because there is some like people who connect the hamburger to Hamburg. I don't know about the hot dog too much. I think a lot of the food history stuff can get pretty lost to mythos. But the funny, and this is just like a little quick thing. Food history wise, right? You can argue that both Americans and Italians invented pizza because obviously, like American style pizza is its own very different thing from like
Right.
the type of
But I mean,
pizza
it
that was
was
served in the
American
Roman
Italians
Empire.
who invented it, right? So,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, and the fortune cookie is an American invention. Like
Right.
there's no fortune. Like it was invented by
Right.
a Chinese American individual in California, and then marketed it
I
as
mean, to be fair,
Chinese.
like I mean, fortune cookies are cool, but like, do you really want to, claim that accomplishment? I don't know. It's just,
I love
I don't
fortune cookies.
celebrate.
I
I
mean, they're
like,
tacky, but they
I
taste
can leave
good.
them, but like, yeah, I definitely like pizza. Pizza is a much bigger
Yeah, you'll
staple. I'm
take.
like,
Okay,
that's
fair.
that's like a Nobel Prize or Pulitzer, or whatever. Like, the fortune cookie is like a participation
Yeah,
trophy.
I'll take the deep dish and the New York slice. Yeah, okay, I'll take those. I do love
Deep
fortune
dish
cookies, but I'll take those.
is. I'm not even gonna get into that, but let's go.
But no, but this is the funny part, right? About all these sorts of things where, culture, credit, invention, yada yada. Obviously, they're never you know, monocultures, right? So whenever we're like pizza's one thing or hamburgers are one thing or country or rap is one thing, it's kind of silly. And you see also that conservative tendency to like create these sort of monomyths, right? The monomyth of the guy that like goes to church, has emotions, then transitions to, oh, the guy that like, teaches his son how to fish and drinks a little too much. Then now transitions into the guy that's drunk at the bar, right? Like the problem, like because like Morgan Wallen and Post Malone project that like kind of problem child, country boy, right? So the monomyth has changed over time, and you'll see people in the country scene because it attracts a lot of conservatism for many reasons because it tries to often uphold conservative themes. Maybe not this new brand of country, but people often listening to country, it's like, oh, it's not like how it used to be. It's not like how it used to be. Country artists have always, fallen into that problem of not making the type of stuff that people expect them to do. I mean, it's the problem that even Dolly Parton ran into, of all people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be honest, I don't like have a super like well informed, a perspective of country music. I don't, I listen to some things every once in a while, but like, it's just like it's not enough that like I like in general, all music, truthfully, I just, as I've gotten older, I just like kind of stuck to a time capsule of the old,
Mm.
hits and stuff. I do find, new songs every once in a while. If I hear something in like a TV show or something, it grabs my attention. I'm like, oh, I got to hear that. But like, other than that, like, I don't really like tune in too much to like what's new. So a lot of my tastes are very much, 2000 or before. I just, but yeah, like, or 2010ish, but if even, but yeah, I'm definitely like very much into like old like 90s boom bap, like 2000s underground hip hop, like Excel and like
Yeah.
Cannabis and rappers like that. But yeah, I don't know.
There's a good quote from John Waters, and that I always like to use in moments like this, where John Waters talks about, the day you become old is the day you stop listening to new music, which I kind of like that idea a lot. I mean, I'm not
I
getting the
won't
quote
lie, I'm
correct.
probably old. And here's the thing, right? So let's pivot a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
So this is why I kind of stopped listening to music, right? My days today, right, like are filled very much with, I do work obviously because I have to. Fortunately, I work from home, so I don't necessarily have to drive and stuff. I am terrified, and this is a thing that we could touch on maybe, which is like AI and stuff. I think I am a software engineer. I got a degree in computer science, and so. I've been working as a software engineer for about 3.5 years now, and AI, for sure, is a big threat to pretty much any single industry that like uses computers to make money. AI is a threat to you. I think a lot of people might undersell that, like number one. One argument I've heard against AI is that it's not like 100% perfect, which people need to understand it doesn't need to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say, for example, when you go to a grocery store, right? And we all see these self checkout machines. You could have 10, whatever, of 12 of them. And like, there are, all these, self checkout machines. They're not perfect. But they have replaced the jobs of 12 cashiers, or maybe let's say 11 cashiers, because they have one person who goes around to each individual fucking machine and they have to, debug anything that goes wrong. So, like, it doesn't matter if it's 100% perfect. It doesn't, like, AI doesn't have to be this like weird science fiction, like self, introspective or whatever,
AGI, that like Sam Altman, often is like, we're getting closer to AGI, right? That's the
right.
selling
But
point
it
he
could
tries
it
to
could
use.
just be a tool. But like, if I can, like, I'm a developer, right? And if I can do the same amount of work with AI helping me out, as 9 other developers, then that means 9 other developers lose their jobs, right? And so that's 90% of the workforce who has now lost their job. And this is just one little tiny like facet of like my perspective as a programmer. But
Yeah.
let's think about literally every single fucking career that you can, like, anything where you can make money using a computer is now at threat. For example, OnlyFans. AI can generate pornography and then just try to sell that, or virtual girlfriends and stuff like that. Or let's pivot from OnlyFans, music, right? AI can also create music, and then like it can just perpetuate, and they can create songs, like it takes me maybe like a year or whatever to try to work on a song. AI can produce like 100 of them every single day or something, and like they'll all comply with music theory, which tells you like, oh, if you play all these notes within this certain chord, and like all of that comes together, it will sound like a pretty decent song. And like, as it gets better and better, that's another potential where, like, okay, industry lost, people can no longer make money off of music. And I do understand, like, maybe the counterpoint is that, there is a human aspect of it where, people don't necessarily want to get their music from a computer, they want to get it from a human. But I still feel like, this is a much bigger threat than a lot of people perceive it to be, or like claim, like we should be panicking about this right now. And the fact that there's two like sides of the coin, where I feel like, okay, America, the country, is trying to compete because China also came out with their own AI, which is actually kind of kicking our AI's ass, by the
Not
way.
anymore, but it got pretty close early on. Looking at news
Weren't
sort of
they
like
weren't they
developments,
able
like
to do the same amount of computation with
they with
inferior
less
chips?
energy. So the way the okay, so the benefits of the DeepSeek model are the fact that it uses less energy, but it
But that
piggybacks
is, we
off of
can't just
released
undersell
models.
that. That
No, I'm
that
not underselling
that
it.
that's millions and or even billions of dollars, just for the record. But yeah, keep
Yes.
going.
So I'm not trying to, so that's the huge benefit, right? It's not an underselling benefit. It's just like a factual benefit, right? You can run it on less RAM, smaller GPUs, right? So while it's a less capable model, because it's backboned and piggybacks off of the stuff released by like OpenAI and
Right.
other models, so it uses other models' codes, reworks them, kind of like gets rid of the waste, so it's not as technically good of a model, but in terms of being a very like utilitarian model, yeah, it's nearly as good for less energy, less computing power needed. So that's where China is winning. China's AI is not as quote unquote intelligent, to kind of debase that word. But I
Right.
mean,
I can agree with you on that.
but they're winning in terms of like figuring out how to do near computation for much less energy. So that's the difference, right? Where the Americans are going about this in a very wasteful way, and I say this as an American, where it's like we are going about this very wastefully. Oh, just shove in all the data. Oh, just shove in all the energy. Who cares? Acting as if we have unlimited energy and data towards this stuff.
Well,
Whereas,
also there's definitely like diminishing returns, right? Like the more data you shove at it, like you're only getting like a 1% improvement at a certain point. Like if you give it like 10,000 data points, that's going to improve it like 70%. But then like once you do like a million, then it's just like getting the extra 20%. Then when you do a billion, oh, you're just getting a little like nudge.
yeah. And while the Chinese model is a matter of reverse engineering, I mean, things can be reverse engineered well, right? Like, I think there's this sort of notion that reverse engineering is always going to equal a low quality product, which isn't necessarily the case. So, I
No,
mean,
I
so
mean, here's the thing. Unfortunately, I genuinely think that China has done a better job of facilitating a labor market that is better skilled than the American labor market. Does that make sense?
well, it depends on
Or do
what
you disagree?
skills.
If you do, like, I mean,
Well,
I'm very uninformed. This is the thing I wanted to say before we got into this whole like little tangent, because I wanted to make it very clear at the beginning of the podcast, right? These are our roles, right? I'm very dumb and uninformed.
no, that's not
You
true.
have a lot of, like information about a lot of different topics that like I value, and my job as a podcaster is to try to pull that out of you and try to bring you down to my level, because like not everybody, it like I don't know. I've seen like other podcasts where like somebody would be like, explain like finance to me, and then like explain it like I'm an idiot, but then like the person just kind of like starts going into these really like intense details that nobody
Yeah.
can understand. And like so my job is really to kind of like bring you like, just try to like make sure we're all like understanding what's going on in your head, but like in a more concise way than, or more coherent and less gate kept way than like
Yeah.
maybe academics teaches you to think and phrase them.
Well, I mean, I work as an intro professor, right? So I am
Right, right,
very
right.
used to that sort of thing where I'm like, oh, here's Kendrick Lamar, here's SpongeBob, here's Rick and Morty, right? Like, but also I try to teach very sophisticated stuff and simplify it, right? So I will give students like Deleuze, Guattari, Heidegger, right? I'm using the fancy names to emphasize like the quote unquote fanciness of it. But when you
Right.
really get down to these sorts of things, yeah, like they're not as sophisticated as some try to gatekeep it as. And the other thing, it's like, I don't have the knowledge of computer, programming, right? And there's areas where I'm like, hey, I don't know. I definitely need to be corrected. To
Yeah.
me, one of the things I often run into, it's like I have a job that's perceived as prestigious, but really at the end of the day, I'm like, no, I do a job that, and this goes into the question of skill, right? So I have a job that provides a certain skill, but then somebody else, a software engineer, a car mechanic, a lawyer, a waiter, a janitor, right? They have skills that are separate from my own, right? With specialization, right? The fact that we all
Right, right.
participate in a labor market where like, all right, you do the computering, you do the teaching, you
All
do
right.
the this, right?
But
We all
like
have different
let's get a
skills.
little bit back onto like the topic of AI here.
Yeah.
Because I just really like I want to know your perspective on like maybe what I was saying earlier. I
Mm.
personally feel like AI is a very big threat. This is the way I feel. Like so this is the way I feel about like the overall timeline, right? There is a clear progression where capital, I think, is becoming more valuable than labor. I already think it is, but it's growing and growing. And we're going to this point of like, it's like a spectrum of like, oh, it's like, it's 10 and like, 90, but now it's like, oh, 50 and like, 50. But like, we're getting further and further to the point where it's going to be 100% capital. Like here's the reality. I think the better AI and automation in terms of machines get, we're getting closer and closer to 100% capital, 0% labor. Like, so here's why I say that. So, like, you can think back about, like, there was like a dock strike or whatever, where like port workers were like, basically, they were on strike because like they didn't want to be replaced by like automation labors. And I saw like a video and these like, it's basically like a port, where there's like, one, two maybe workers, and then everything else is just machines. Meanwhile, there's like usually like hundreds or maybe even I don't know the exact number, but like hundreds of workers maybe in that same like area. So now this is the reality. We already have the technology where we could be like automating our port docks, and we could cut out like 95% of the labor, if not more. We are already at a point where, well, this is the thing. If we adapted that technology, we all as Americans would probably benefit from this. I do sympathize, for the people who would maybe lose their jobs in that, process. But we as a whole would probably benefit because we're using a more efficient technology that is actually better than humans in some way. And that's going to lower the cost of our groceries more than any fucking other thing that we ever, argue about. But okay, so we don't do that because we want to preserve the, jobs for these people. So this is like also happening on the AI level. And so the reality is the people that profit off of all of this, right, are the people who own this capital, whether that be like, oh, I own like a port, automated shipping dock or whatever, and I only have to employ like 2 laborers to maintain it. But like other than that, I just spend like $1,000 on all this equipment, and like bam, I just get billions of dollars in profit. Like I know I'm like the numbers like aren't gonna add up to real shit, but it's like you get the idea. And so and it's the same thing. Like it's just like it's the same thing digitally. Like we're doing this like on like a computer platform as well, where it's like, okay, well, I just own all of the revenue that's happening online. Like it's just like I can like why pay for fucking accountants if I can just like get AI to automate it and like fucking pay, so it's like as long as I have enough money to pay for this service, then like therefore I have this now automated system. I'm TurboTax, right? And like I don't need to pay for accountants anymore. I'm gonna, instead of like, because whatever we have, whatever that pie is, whatever $1 billion that they make every single year, that has to be divvied amongst all of the like accountants that work there and like help them crunch the numbers. But if I can get AI to do that, all I have to do is pay a service to AI. They're going to give me a much better deal, and then all of a sudden like all of my money just like I just make more money. And so this is what the problem that I'm seeing is that we're just moving more and more towards capital being the only way, literally the only way. If we get to a point where it's like 100 and 0 in terms of like how efficient, like if machines and AI can completely replace us, which I don't think will happen anytime within my lifetime, but maybe, I don't know. But either way, if that happens, then that means that there is literally 0 value for human labor. And the only people in the entire world who will have any ability to access money, power, resources of any type will be the billionaires who own the fucking like those automated machine like fucking buildings. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, completely. There's CPG Gray argued, the YouTuber argued for this a while ago, and saying the expression, cars did not create better jobs for more horses, right? But the horses didn't get more jobs after the automobile. And so going a little bit back to the skill thing, but kind of tying it in, skill is a relative thing, right? Skill is valued contextually, right? In a time of war, a sniper is more valuable than a time of peace, right? So this is, the thing that you're right that, starting with Henry Ford, but continuing now, right? The process of automation, right, in the factories has slipped into the digitized processes, which have made more individuals' works automated. The way AI functions as a predictive, not a generative model, it operates as a automated machinery, right? AI and automated are directly connected. AI as it exists is a form of automation. And so, yeah, there's definitely these concerns that in some sense, Marxists have been pointing to, even though I'm not a Marxist myself, but there is some legitimate criticism here where it's like, yeah, if you give that much leverage to the owners of production, then they're going to have leverage over all of society. The owners of the factories, the owners of the machines, the owners of the tools, the technology. And when you have individuals, with that much sort of power and that much sort of sway, then others are going to be left out. What Marx points to, amongst other things, is the potentiality for capital to dominate the state. This is something else Deleuze and Guattari point to back in Anti-Oedipus, where they're also saying like, hey, this is unprecedented in human history that governments are bowing down to economics, right? That you look back in human history and economics was always just like through the government. But what capital does is it accumulates its own systems and tools of power and buys off government to work for it, which is unprecedented in human history. And that's only becoming more so the case right now. It was staved off a little bit in the era of social democracy and the monopoly busting, but we're not in that era right now. The social democratic states that exist in Europe aren't really fighting against the existence of corporations, and the powers that be in the United States are doing anything but monopoly busting, the exact opposite. It was Joe Biden that proposed the first antitrust laws in a long, long time, and that's that's not the era we're in.
Right. I was gonna ask you about this, right? So I I think about the internet and I think about the trajectory of the internet because the reality is we've already started introducing paywalls to each individual like application or website. And so I'm wondering how long is it going to be in your opinion or like do you have any type of like insight on this? But like how long is it going to be before we're just fucking paying for every single like thing? Like, oh, I want to go to Facebook. Well, that's going to be $1 every single month because if I don't pay $1 every single month, then I'm going to not be able to subscribe to Facebook. Same thing with like, because we already have this with all of our, TV ads. You have Netflix, but you can also imagine like because we have these monopolies, they just bundle everything together. So I can get the meta bundle. That'll be like $10, but I get to get like fucking Facebook. I get Snapchat. I get WhatsApp. I get Instagram. I get Threads. All of these things together. Like that's going to be whatever, $10 a month. Fire. Okay, then we have these other like fucking, websites and applications. I can't get any news unless I pay for it. So they're just gonna like this is I feel like the inevitable end of like what the current internet is currently moving towards because like I already look at like so I've watched capitalism creep on the internet my whole life, right? I was born 1989. I started getting on the internet back when I was like, I don't know, like 12 or so. And like, I was pretty frequent on it. And yeah, there's a whole nother like tangent I would love to go on with you about like maybe like you had a whole like fucking like section about like different social media platforms and philosophy on those platforms. And 4chan for sure interests the fuck out of me because it's such a fucking weird and fucking controversial place. But So keep me to that. But what was I
Yeah.
saying before that?
No, but I can
Yeah, go on.
run off of that. I think that fortune telling only makes, fortune for the teller. So I don't like to be very like future predictive and stuff because, in many ways it could just be a ruse, right? Where it's like, who knows, right? That being said, though, you are completely right that the trend has been, further capitalization of the internet. And certainly one of the creative ways to do this has been the selling of data, keeping
Right.
the apps free, but the selling of data. So,
I mean, video games are really the like biggest like transformative like video games. When I grew up, like the only profit they made was you buy the game. Now it's like sometimes like NBA 2K, like they literally sell the same fucking code base, right? I know you're a little
yep.
bit of a basketball fan. You ever played that?
Loved, yeah, of course I've played 2K before, and it is the same base every
and
time. Maybe
and yeah,
slight
they're
graphics
iterating on it.
updates.
They're like modifying it a little bit, but like either way, like this is a great example of like they have turned like they because this was the reality. There was a brief window of time when I was young where they couldn't figure it out. They didn't understand how to make profit. So like video games, they were just like, oh, we're fucked. We're now never going to be able to make money on video games again because everybody's gonna pirate our shit on like Kaza or fucking LimeWire or like one of the other fucking uTorrent, whatever the shit. And like so, they were very fucking concerned that they would never be able to make a profit again. But they've turned it the fuck around. Obviously, whoever did it, kudos to them. They're playing the capitalism game. They got it right on the fucking mark, better than I think any other industry that had to translate into the fucking internet. Like the movie industry hasn't even like made to the same level of like leaps and bounds. But like, so now they're like reselling the same fucking code base every single year. So it's just like a small, like minor tweaks. Like, who gives a shit? But you got to pay $60 every single year. But then on top of that, they have like the microtransactions. Every time your character gets like a haircut or something, they're like, oh, we're gonna take away some like victory or whatever VC. I don't even remember what it
Depends
fucking
on the
stands
game,
for.
but yeah, VC is a funny way to put it because I think that's the V Bucks is the Fortnite currency. I forget 2Ks if it's VC. I think you might be right about that.
But yeah, they literally just fucking found a way to make even more profit than they were already making prior to the internet. But there was a brief period of time where they were like, "Oh, we got to figure this out." And so everybody's doing that. It's not just the video game industry. Everybody's looking at it like, oh, how do we make more money off of the internet? Well, this is the obvious fucking answer. Like I mentioned this to my wife and like she was like, oh, don't give them any ideas. But like I 100% believe they already have this idea. They're just trying to figure out how to fucking impose it on people because we're just like getting like when you look at like the NY like Times or whatever that's behind a paywall. Like you already have like different like fucking accesses to certain like information. They're going to put everything behind a paywall because that's what capitalism does. Every single fucking thing that they can, they have to make a profit off of it, right? This is like literally the inherent property of capitalism where it's just like, it's a toll booth, right? It's just like, if you want anything, you got to pay for it. Air. When you look at like fucking like I think it was in like I don't know if it was China or Japan, but they had like vending machines with fucking clean air because the air was so fucking polluted. So the only way to get clean air is to fucking pay for it. That's fucking insane. And that is coming to America soon. Fucking appreciate this shit. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
Well, what I mean, I ask myself that
This
question
is
all
what
the
you signed
time.
up for.
No, I love this. No, because at the end of the day, right? I mean, I do ask myself this question a lot. I mean, one of the things I try to emphasize in my philosophy courses and ethics courses is humanization. The first lecture I always begin with is disability, mainly through the social theory of disability, which is basically the idea of that what is disabling is largely, the physical environment and the social systems that we have that allow for environments not to be accessible. And I go into other topics like charity, homelessness, etc. And so I think this is something that's just true in all of human history. What the heck are we doing? And at the end of the day, right, so many people have tried to answer the question, what are we doing and how do we fix it? And, I'm not going to be so arrogant to be like, I got it. No, of course not. But what I can say is this, is that ultimately what capitalism does very well is that process of dehumanization. It's a very good system for dehumanization because it values individuals for labor, for productivity, right? It's not a system predicated on individuality from a economic sense as much as people think. So this isn't unique to capitalism necessarily because it has its evolution from feudalism, but this is to say, as much as we talk about individualism and capitalism and value yourself and love yourself, individuals are valued insofar as they are productive, right? We think of disability, achieving some sort of value once the individual that is disabled can work. We think of immigrants as, oh, they're great farm workers. And I'm sorry, I don't want my own family just reduced to their labor, right? Like my family is much more than the fact that they came here as bankers and janitors and et cetera of the sort. It's like, no, they escape a political situation where, a friend of theirs got shot in the face, where my abuelo was jailed temporarily. And so I think one of the things that I see as a sort of kind of big problem in all these things, like, oh, how could you like sell someone air? How could you just like not consider someone's job when you're developing an AI, et cetera, is through that process of dehumanization. And that capitalism isn't unique in dehumanizing, but does so in a unique way because it thinks in terms of we line go up and humans are the line go up. Whereas in feudalism, it wasn't line go up. There was no line. There was just simply like, hey, have you produced enough to satisfy the king? You've produced enough? All right, cool, you're good to go. But now it's this kind of constant process of more and more. The line goes up, greater GDP, greater productivity, right? And that sort of pressure to, make the economy more powerful really dehumanizes.
Right. Um. Man.
Let's get more anger. I want to see it.
No, capitalism makes me mad, man.
Well, I mean, it's made a lot of people mad. You're not the first, you're not the last. I mean, I will say this, right? Like I myself, am a social democratic individual, so I am a capitalist technically.
Well, can we pivot on here?
Yeah,
Um, I was thinking. So I think there are a lot of people maybe misinformed, and like I remember, like like even I know people who like I just know people from a lot of pockets of life, and like not everybody is necessarily Trump, favored, but like at the same time, there are people unaware of certain things. So I just want to kind of center in on like what why is socialism not the devil? Like, you understand
well,
what I'm
I'm
saying?
I'm not a socialist myself. I'm a social democrat.
Okay. But like, I mean, socialism, communism, like, can we really dumb it down for people? Okay, I don't know. I almost don't like. I'm very dumb, and so I'm a thinker, but I don't read it all. I don't all my thoughts are seminal, right? Pretty much, and like
Right.
so but like so I'm smart in some ways, but I'm also just very dismissive of like what other people expect me to believe, and
Hmm.
so um, but so I just feel like okay, hang on one second.
Okay.
Okay, socialism. So I don't know. I've been thinking about like I did not even read Marx. I get the like basic like construction of it like and like so I do understand that communism is not like there's never actually been a communist country in the way that Marx describes what a communist country is.
Correct.
So, like, the reality is when people claim that they're communist and like, you have, I think I'm very ignorant on history, but like Lenin, I think was like one of the ones, and like there was another like, yeah, really like a lot of people demonize communism based on like, oh, these like, leaders were communist, and then like therefore that means that communism is always bad. But like it's literally they were calling. I mean, I feel like it's like how rhinos are like Republican in name only. It's also like communist in name only. Like it's they weren't really like communists. They just had their bastardized version of what that was. Or correct me if I'm wrong here.
Well, in some sense, and this is the thing that's confusing about Marx, Marx is a philosopher who develops his thought, right? He's not just like a stagnant thinker. And so, kind of one of the main go to definitions of communism is the stateless, classless, moneyless society and anarcho communism, right? That Marx talks about. However, he also talks about forms of luxury communism, right? Where it's like, oh, well, we have all the machines making all of the stuff for us, right? So you could at some point in Marx's life, you could put Marx in a time machine, show him all the AI, and he'd be like, this has potentially liberating capacities, right? Like the robots do all the labor for us, and we can all be artists and poets and etc. of the sort. So not even Marx is clear on what communism is. For him, communism is more of a guiding star towards the improvement of workers, right? That's kind of the main thing. And then socialism in all of its instantiations, democratic or authoritarian, the idea of socialism, whether in truth or just in name, is, the betterment of workers' conditions through worker ownership of the means of production.
Right.
Now, I have some bias because my family members, right? One had to flee the Soviet Union, the others Cuba, right? And so one of the things I think is the main problem with these regimes is their authoritarianism, right? Authoritarianism always comes with violence, with bloodshed, with marginalization, with targeting. That's why so much of my work is on fascism. I write a lot about fascism. Don't really write about communism because right now, clearly, it doesn't have any power in the way that fascism does right now. And so for me, I think the main concern of sort of, regimes of power is their authoritarianism, right? That as long as you have authoritarianism, you develop a sense of any means necessary politics. So even if you're like, have like the good intent or the good goal or even the more noble goal, which even as someone who's not a communist, I would say that like that communists more often than not, when you interact with them, meet with them, they have the better goals, the better intentions, even politics that are closer to my own. The issue at hand, I think, comes with, when you have Castro, who is an authoritarian that was also extremely homophobic. We don't even need to get into Stalin. And so, yeah, I think one of the issues I run into a lot of individuals who are very, at least in my estimation, right, not open enough to reform. And by not being open enough to reform, you jump into authoritarianism and all of its consequences, be it left or right authoritarianism.
Right. Um. So I mean, like, how do we? Are we fucked? Like,
No, not necessarily.
I mean, like, I don't know. It's like when I look at have I always think of this quote, right, where they're like, there's never been a nonviolent revolution, right? And you're more informed on history than I am. Has there ever been a nonviolent revolution? Is there any like? I feel like let's be real, the fucking left are pussies, right? Like they have no fucking balls. They don't desire to like get into any type of conflict, so they're not going to rise up against an authoritarian regime. And like, the people on the right, they have zero fucking desire to do that. Some of them are on board, others are just like, whatever. And like, then you have people in the independent scene. I don't know, just like it just seems like, this it just seems like, yeah, we're in this like fascist fucking regime, and
Well,
that's what we're gonna be living with.
there's plenty of critiques of the libs, obviously, right? Because they're very like do nothing. So to put it like this, right? I think the best explainer as to why political violence does not occur is materialist, right? I think there are ideological reasons why people, for example, voted for Trump, right? There are genuine racists, there are genuine xenophobes. Like, of course, these people exist, but the vast majority of people that voted for Trump did so as casual voters, right? Did so as the individuals who are like, fuck it, I'll take a chance to lower my grocery prices. This doesn't mean it should be forgiven and forgotten. This doesn't mean that such a vote is justified or not. This is simply to say the vast majority of people vote on their material conditions, and
But
right, the
like,
vast majority of people won't rise up if their material conditions are
can I push
well
back on this
enough.
a little
Of
bit?
course, 100%.
Um, okay, I do understand that I think a lot of people are just very fucking uninformed about economics, but like, can we be realistic about the fact that like the grocery prices were never fucking a thing under like it wasn't like Biden pressed the fucking inflation go up button, right? Like Trump number one appointed Jerome Powell to be the fucking Federal Reserve, the person that oversees it. And so this was during his fucking tenure. And then he like, obviously Biden came in and all during the fucking COVID pandemic, right? There was again, so many people just don't fucking like they try to pretend like Trump wasn't at all involved in COVID. Like his presidency was post COVID, which it wasn't. He literally was in the middle of fucking COVID, right? Everything he did was a reaction to COVID and, going on from 2019 on. And so this is just the reality that like fucking I already fucking lost it. What do you remember what I was talking about prior to that?
Well, to build off a little bit, right, and maybe this will spark your memory. I don't want to call people like dum dums for misunderstanding economics. What I am saying is that
Well,
individuals understand economics in specific terms, but you got it.
no, I was just gonna say in terms of economics, right? So I guess that was the whole frame of this, right? Like economics and like so this wasn't fucking Biden's fault, right? Like it was literally just like we were in a fucking pandemic that like Trump was the fucking overseer of, and he made the decision as the president of the United States to disperse this fucking money to people. Now, whether that was right or wrong, PPP loans 100% got taken advantage of. We are all very aware of that. I know people who are even in the lowest, like fucking like impoverished communities that know that they have taken advantage of PPP loans during the pandemic. Okay, so there's no question about this, right? And like so there's that there was the stimulus or whatever checks, and maybe they were necessary. There's good economic reasons to like say why like maybe at that certain time like that was the right thing to do. We need to be objective about the fact that like there was a lot of unknowns at the time, and there was just like a lot of data that we were still waiting on. And like I'm not criticizing Trump for his decision to put money into the economy, but we as a society need to acknowledge that, okay, this money got all printed, right? We are no longer like a gold backed currency, right? We have a fucking infinite supply. We just print fucking money and throw it into the fucking well, and that dilutes the fucking like the value of the currency that we have. And so Trump hired Jermaine Powell. All the while, if you watch after the fucking stock market crashed, after the fucking pandemic happened, it fucking shot the fuck up. It was never higher during the pandemic, and like right after the the stock market was clearly in a bubble. You can even find, if you Google it, you can find articles still dated from 2019, 2020, whatever the fuck. And they still clearly state we are in an economic bubble. So this was not unknown information. I know this because I was paying attention at the time. And like, we were in a bubble and every fucking body knew it. And so then Joe Biden takes presidency. The Federal Reserve did not do anything to act on it. And they took too fucking long to fucking start putting on interest rates. And by the time that they did, then like inflation had already gotten kind of out of control. But by the end of Biden's presidency, you saw inflation starting to go down. And that's because they put these fucking measures in, which are all fucking economic tools, which are very fucking normal. None of this is like we're pressing a panic button. This is like, we just know that like we've been studying economics for so long, and we know like this is how we need to react, whether you call it, I don't know, it's like, whatever, but like, so this is and like then like all of a sudden like now Trump is in fucking office, but it's like he's not going to be able to fix the fact that like we've been in fucking inflation. It's the Federal Reserve that's still going to have to fucking control everything, but they're at fucking odds because like Trump wants fucking data that proves that like he has like thousands and thousands of improvements of the GDP, which like are fucking incomprehensible. But like that doesn't exist unless you fucking just bribe somebody to fucking print it out. The end. All right, you can.
No. I mean, I want to always build off what you're saying, not like treat it as like a tennis match with turns. But yeah, you point out, we can get into the particulars of that economic analysis, which, in many ways tell the story pretty well. Maybe the only issues, maybe some little gaps here and there, but whatever, right? But most people aren't thinking in these terms, not because they're dumb or stupid. They're busy. They have other things to do. They may not, make contact with these things. And so while things may be widely known, they are not universally known. And, what ends up happening is people get economics in tidbits. And this is true for everybody, right? Because different people engage with different aspects of the market, not the whole market, right? I'm not trading in foreign currencies. I have a retirement account through my college, that one of the colleges I work for, right? So I'm not, a stock market trader. So lo and behold, right, I don't understand the full ramifications of that side of the economy. And so when individuals think about economics, they think about it in limited contextual terms. One of the biggest correlates to who's going to win an election is gas prices, because individuals think often in terms of that the president has a gas price button, right? We almost think of things in terms of that the president controls the economy, and it's not a complicated relationship between OPEC and Norway and who's drilling, who's not, right? There's only so much individuals can do in a sort of economy, in a sort of market. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of factors. And what people ultimately forget, what economics is, it's the distribution of resources, right? We have all these complex markets and layers and philosophies, and really any colleague of mine in the economics department will just tell you like, no, economics is how do we get shit to people. And we forget that because we're caught up in all these interest rates, this language, yada yada, and we forget base economics. Like, hey, how do we make sure that like you have food? How do we make sure you have a house?
Mm-hmm. I have a question. Do you think it's possible? Because like this is a thing I was thinking about recently. Um, I was having a discussion maybe a couple of podcasts back about like capitalism and like how I perceive capitalism, because like kind of I like learned some things, like I have a very like rudimentary knowledge, but like in economics, and like so I like but I learned it because like economics teaches it to you without any like human emotion or like any interactions of humans in it. Like it doesn't talk about political stuff. It just talks about like the organization of
Supply and demand. Supply and demand. Supply
yeah,
and demand. Supply
basically.
and demand.
But so what I was wondering is, do you think personally, your opinion, and maybe you can like interject some like, real world examples. Um, I always think like I want to be an optimist and I want to believe that like any political structure or not political economic structure, whether it be communism, socialism, even capitalism, um, if you put the right people in them, people who like genuinely care for the people, then like it will be pretty good. When the problem is obviously always corruption. But do you think, because when I think of capitalism, right, this is the way that I imagine capitalism working under a society where people are doing everything, in my opinion, the right way. So I think of like sports or whatever, and like so like because capitalism is always proposed as this idea of like a competition between like businesses and stuff, and so at the end of the day, if it's a competition, there should be a referee. And so the government should be that referee that basically, does whatever is necessary to promote a good, clean fight, right? If it's not a good, clean fight, then the government should not like, allow that. So, it's like when you have these big corporations, the reality is I feel like they get lobbyists and then like they get to like manipulate the laws, a little bit in their favor and then that helps them out. But that's not a good, clean fight. That's a compromised referee who was bribed and was like, okay, well, you're going to help me out. Don't fucking like, allow them the opportunity to win. So, but I think like a good fucking referee, like a good government is basically like a good referee. But do you think that like based on, and we're talking like, let's just like draw from philosophy as well and just like human nature. Do you think it's possible that humans could ever fucking be like, do you think that we could ever have that a good capitalistic system where people are like, we're just like, we're the government, we love and care about a competition so much that we respect the like fucking cleanness and integrity of the sport more than we want fucking money from grifters trying to like, influence the sport?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I disagree with is there being like any sort of like end system where we have solved all the problems. So, when we look at sports, there's constantly rules being added to the NBA, to the NFL, right? Even the NHL to a lesser degree. Because you have to make reforms, right? New problems, new situations, new scenarios come up. And so while I say I'm a social democratic capitalist, that is right here, right now. If social democratic capitalism can remain and constantly reform, and that helps out people, amazing, right? If it reforms into something else entirely that helps out people, great. Right now, I am a social democratic capitalist because I think that's a direction to reform towards globally, and I think it's a direction that's had a good track record at improving people's lives. It has two kind of big flaws. Well, three, but the three main flaws are democratic flaws, right? When people get voted out, can you maintain systems? Which feeds into number two. Like once you pass a reform, how do you keep a reform? This is especially concerning with how we've moved away from Teddy Roosevelt's monopoly busting into like building new monopolies, or how there's conversation of privatizing social security. And number three, there's still a level of exploitation built into capitalism inherently, right? It would be silly for me to ignore that. And so, right, where you were talking about the government as a referee, where I'm talking about, these, social democratic systems, right? This puts us on, like, in some sense for many, the very left of liberalism. And okay, so be it, right? For me, the labels are labels of, convenience. So there definitely are, periods and times we can point to as like making things better, for people. but I don't see like an end of history where we have it all solved. I do think that, being uh, realistic and trying to make things better and believing we can make things better, believing we can reform, believing we can solve new problems is more pragmatic. And I don't even view it as a cynical pragmatism. It's just like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, right? We weren't talking about AI, 10 years ago, but now here everyone is talking about AI. So I think it's good to be mindful that there is no like true end of like history in the sense of time moving forward, things coming up. There's going to be new historical events that we are going to have to react to as present events.
Right. Um, I'm going to pivot a little bit and go back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. I think you had this kind of interesting series I thought about, like, online philosophy. And so you kind of talk about like the kind of, I didn't watch all of them, but
Yeah, no problem.
I watched the 4chan one and a little bit of the Instagram one, but it's kind of like talking about how philosophy appears on these like different social media platforms. Um, and so I had like two maybe thoughts. One was like, I would love to see you do maybe like an online philosophy of like the red pill movement, right? Like, or something of that nature. Because, you know, no matter how you look at it, I think it should constitute as philosophy, whether or
Mhm.
not it's correct or not. These are people I think that are kind of conceptualizing what they perceive the world to be, and like based on like their I don't know. It's just a weird bastardization or whatever.
Yeah, I would say this. There's a lot of content already out there on red pill philosophy. ContraPoints has talked about it. Plastic Pills has talked about it. So the purpose of the series I'm been putting together and almost done with is to show how like different internet applications and different environments can shape philosophy, right? Because we often think of philosophy being independent of like embodied spaces or independent of territories, as Deleuze and Guattari would put it. But the space in which we express philosophy is also going to shape that thought, right? The other users, right? Are going to shape it. And so the focus for me is to think about like how is 4chan shaping thought versus how is YouTube shaping thought, right? What sort of features, what sort of audience, right? And how is that shaping people's thought? And yeah, that includes, for example, like red pill individuals being more attracted to 4chan, for example. But yeah, there's plenty of great content on red pill philosophy. I don't think it's completely played out, but that's not where my line of thought is going in terms of internet philosophy, even though I very much see myself as like a bridge between both worlds. Like I'm very much in the classroom, in the professional academic space, but I'm also on Discord. I'm also on YouTube a lot, right? So I try to like commune and between kind of both sort of spaces. But yeah, the focus on the series is to talk about something very untouched in internet philosophy, which internet philosophy I think gets not a good or bad rap. It doesn't really have a rap yet, but I think
Right.
just like my
I
views with
think
hip
a lot
hop.
of people don't really acknowledge that like it is like a shaping thing, right? Like, and like we are definitely becoming, subjected to like certain like, echo chamber bubbles or whatever, where we kind of like reflect, the ideas of those around us, and whether that be like you're in MAGA or
Or the
you're like in some,
algorithms around us.
what's that?
Or even the algorithms around us, right?
Right.
Like the algorithm you induce yourself to on 4chan versus Instagram is going to shape your line of thought. And so for me, it's like I think internet philosophy has a lot of legitimization in the same way as hip hop does, right? And there's a lot of very good and admittedly very bad content on online spaces, but there's many people who are, themselves professors on these online spaces, right? There are non-professors which are just as, if not oftentimes smarter than the professors. And then you have stuff that's just made that's like, oh God, oh God, oh God.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I think about it like there's two kind of like interesting points I think with like online interaction. So one is that I think about especially 4chan, like because 4chan is so anonymous. You don't know who is posting. You have no fucking frame of reference of like their post history or anything like that. So every single comment is just a new person. But you also have to consider number one, like there's a lot of like younger people who just post on there and are just fucking trolling or doing whatever the fuck. Um, and like I think it gets maybe taken for granted if you look at it, like some people are not really thinking like, oh, that's a 12-year-old or a 11-year-old or whatever. And if you did know that like their age and their fucking like if you saw their face and them as a human, I think you would definitely perceive this whole conversation a lot differently than you would if you just watched it as a anonymous, text-based fucking interaction. But
Yeah.
the second point is that, and maybe I don't know how like prevalent this is on 4chan, but like maybe it could be. I don't know because 4chan is already so fucking insane and always has been. That like it just it wouldn't really necessarily need AI bots to fucking drive up the intensity of it. But
You
I
could.
think Twitter 100%. Twitter, I have zero doubt in my mind that fucking Elon Musk is trying to create 4chan, but like even worse. And he's trying to like literally like I don't know if he's enabling them. Regardless of whether he himself created these bots, he is enabling political divisiveness. I have zero doubt in my mind. And he is but there's just like a prevalence of every single time you see a tweet or a Reddit post or a Facebook post or whatever it is, if it's only text based, if you don't know this person in person, then there's a very high probability that it could be a bot. It's definitely much higher than most people think it is, right? I think like most people think, oh, like, I'm not even like, most people I don't think ever give it any consideration. The average person probably never looks at the computer screen and thinks to themselves, oh, that's probably a bot. But it's just so prevalent because like number one, there are national interest in terms of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, etc. These are like, domestic fucking threats that have an interest in trying to drive whatever the primary narrative is. And then like there are also foreign interest, whether you're talking about like Russia or China or some other foreign government that is trying to also drive whatever the narrative is, or just trying to divide American people as a whole and trying to create propaganda in one way or another.
Well,
So
on that note of
yeah, go for it.
propaganda, very quickly, because one of the things that happened in my own life, a family member, told me about Q, like about a year or two before Q really took off in mainstream media, and he was just like, "Hey, have you ever heard of 4chan?" I'm like, yes. And he's like, "Oh, there's this Q guy on 4chan." And I'm like, 4chan is an anonymous forum website where anyone could be anyone, right? So this individual did not know the mechanisms of 4chan, right? My own family member, they just didn't know. And
Right.
so, in that sort of regard, yeah, there is something to taking advantage of internet illiteracy, right? My abuela, right, the older Cuban woman, right? She's on the Snapchat, the Instagram, the Facebook, as she calls them all. Right, she's very technologically savvy for a woman in her 80s,
Right.
and she goes on Facebook and is able to go, "Oh, that's AI. Oh, that's AI," right? And so you're not going to necessarily know who's internet literate, but right, one of the things that can be taken advantage of is internet illiteracy. Even for someone like my abuela, as much as she can tell stuff is AI, she doesn't know how to like manipulate the algorithm to get it off or like report certain things. And so we're all illiterate online to a degree. We're all susceptible online to a degree, be it from AIs, be it from, other people.
I mean,
But
100% when I was like talking about like, not being aware of the fact that, oh, these people might be like 12 or 13 or whatever. I very much forget about that all the time. And like, I like read Reddit and I just assume these are all adults, right? Like, and I'm susceptible to that for sure.
yeah, and so it's one of these things where the sort of, I guess, like kind of tying threads. The reason I want to talk philosophically about the ways that, digital environments can affect thought is because, well, physical environments do. So, of course, the digital ones are going to, right? We know this to a degree with sort of ageism when it comes to apps. Facebook is for old people. All the young people are on TikTok. But there's going to come a day where, TikTok's going to become the old person app,
Yeah.
right? I saw this, in middle school when, all the older kids had MySpace and I got on the hip, cool, young app, Facebook. So, but it's
We would
antiquated.
have been so much better off if y'all didn't fucking touch that thing.
Well, touched it or not, here I
I was
am, right?
such a better person, a better human being than fucking Mark Zuckerberg.
But here I am, right? And I'll address my own students, like trying to like, I try to keep up to some small degree with TikTok stuff. I have to thank my girlfriend for that because I'm not really on social media. So when I do my social media coverage, I look into like a lot of other people's like videos and content and stuff like that and do my research kind of like outside observer-y. Other than YouTube and Discord, I'm not really on any social media. But what I can say is that, I keep up with these things because there are other environments that people are invested to, that they think into, that they occur on, that they live on, right? And so they're important to philosophy, right? TikTok is important to philosophy because it's where so many people are getting their news, their information, where people are getting, their consumer interests. I mean, I could go on and on. So we, in some sense, have to also think of these apps almost like cities or states or countries, right? That they're environments that happen to have a certain population, and certain populations are going to have certain leanings, right? Certain environments have laws. We could think of the algorithms as almost the laws of these applications. And again, these populations in combination with these algorithms, along with other factors, are going to shape how people think. They're going to shape the politics. We can most clearly see this with leanings towards Israel and Palestine on different applications. If you're on Facebook, it's a very heavy pro-Israeli messaging. If you're on TikTok, it's very pro-Palestinian sort of messaging. And so, we kind of, again, forget that because we think of like the online as this completely interconnected, near nebulous space. But no, we are at an age in the internet where people have been siphoned into territories. The deterritorialization of information that occurred with the young internet is over. Things have been re-territorialized into new space where people have preferential apps, right? They're going to pick Blue Sky or Twitter, depending on their politics, quite likely. And so, yeah, I think it's important to, examine that alongside the types of philosophies that are occurring on the internet. Thankfully, there's plenty of people covering philosophies themselves on the internet, such as the Red Pill, but I don't see a lot of coverage on like how the apps are like shaping philosophical thought, right? And how each exists as its own, philosophical space in some sense.
Right. Um, I don't know. I mean, like, I do see all these like, sorry, I see all these like different subsects of like humans, right? Like, so when I look at like the Trump like voter base, right, I think about like, all right, some of them might be hardcore, like, religious. I get that a little bit. They're like very much in favor of, anti-abortion, and some of them might even be pro, spreading their religion, which AKA genocide. Um, but like, so then like I also think of people who, maybe they just literally did buy the economic cell. Like they're just like, well, when we're like pre-COVID, the economy was good. That just seems it's very frustrating to me because it just seems so like it seems like a very dumb thing to say, but
Well,
like
it lacks context of like it's good to who, good
the
for whom.
economy. Well, no, I mean, yeah, that's true too. But like that's getting into a whole different like rabbit hole, I think. But I was just saying that like there are people who are still perceiving it as like the economy was good prior to a fucking pandemic. Well, no shit, pandemics historically, if you read any fucking history book, like a lot of them are fucking followed by some kind of like economic turmoil, right? Like it's not fucking, it's this is
Wait, you're
like
telling me everyone being sick is not good for production?
yeah, I mean, like, it's just like, it's so fucking, it's like people are fucking up in arms about like the most predictable patterns in fucking history. And it's just like, it's what the fuck are we talking about? But speaking, like, so I mean, I'll get into that maybe in a sec. But like, so here's where I was going to turn, right? So I really do want to see, like, I would love, my personal opinion, I would love to see, the left and right of America get together and find unity and be able to, like, focus on, just trying to make sure that we get to a point where America actually is the American dream that, like, people said, like, thought and envisioned it as, like, back in, like, whatever, early 1900s. But, it just like obviously there are a lot of fucking problems with that too. Like I'm not trying to dismiss any of the fucking issues that we're talking about, like obviously segregation and all those. Like I mean, if you go even before then, Jim Crow bullshit and like all that. But I don't want to get too far into that. But I'm just saying that like uh, I just feel like there are people that like I don't know they over glorify, but I just feel like the left and the right should both be able to like look at like the news cycle and agree that there is propaganda, right? Like there's no way that there's not, because like if you're left and you like if you like here, I mean I don't know, maybe I yeah, I mean there's a level of like illiteracy, but like when I look at like Trump, like I 100% wholeheartedly believe he like tried to overturn the election in 2020 in order to like favor himself, right? Between calling somebody like the fucking Georgia guy and like governor whatever it was, and trying to like or, like find whatever amount, 20,000, 40,000, whatever votes, um, versus like even like posting on Twitter over and over and over again, trying to get his supporters to come out, and then like trying to get them like aggressively like angry about this like stolen election. All of this like just screams to me like okay, well you now have to either believe one of these two narratives, right? I don't think there's any fucking gray area here. You have to either believe one of these two. Either you believe that Donald Trump like he like the Democrats stole the election from Donald Trump. If you believe that, okay, I understand that. That's a thing I accept that you believe. The other side is that you believe that that Donald Trump lost the election. Okay, I accept that you believe that. I don't accept that you believe anything else. That's my personal belief
No,
because
no, I
it's
think
based
that's one
on
of those. It's not as much as I love the Taoists, right? The Taoists speak in terms of like necessary opposites. And there are many things that work this way, right? Tall and short. You can't have tall without short. And I
But
think
in this, I
this is not one of those.
100%
That's what I'm saying.
understand
That's
like
what
a
I'm saying. This is
spectrum
not one
because
of
I
those.
see this as so many things in life. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I feel like based on the evidence
Yeah, yeah,
that I
yeah.
have, that you cannot believe those one of like you cannot be
Well,
on the
well,
spectrum.
it's not even
You
it's not
have
even
to
belief.
because
It's
of
logic.
what?
Like just based off the logic, you're completely
Yes,
correct logic wise, where it's like
but
this
it's
is
like
a
if you don't
this
have that logic, then like you're
that
just
statement,
in
right?
that
This
fucking
isn't this
spectrum.
or that. This is like, no, this is this, that, right? And
But it's
so,
like it's been perpetuated for so long, right? It's not just like this happened and nobody ever talked about it. We all know, right? Like this went to fucking trial in court, right? Like this is not just like this one-off thing that like we can disagree on. It's like either like you have to know this fucking story because it's such a perpetuated fucking thing and such a key part of like the fact that he is now a felon, right? And the reason we all voted for a felon. We can't just dismiss this and just
yeah.
say it's nothing. I absolutely do not buy that at all. I think that's a cop out at fucking answer. I don't fucking buy that because like the reality is like you have to believe one of the two narratives. You don't get a spectrum answer. You have to believe either Democrats stole the election from Trump or you believe that fucking that Biden won. One of the two. Like, you don't get a fucking spectrum because it's been perpetuated for too fucking long. We all know the fucking story. Don't fucking tell me that you don't know fucking whether or not OJ was guilty when we've been fucking plummeted with fucking news about it. Like, if you're a fucking TikTok kid, I get that. But if you were around in the 90s, we were fucking beat the shit out of death with that shit. So it's just like, don't do that. Like, it's not, it doesn't match up with reality, which is just that like we just had a fucking presidency where we had a convicted felon who was convicted. I mean, it's like what do we like? I don't know.
Well, no, well, but this brings up the issue. Like, you want individuals to come together, but there is this or that, right? I'm not going to compromise with fascism, for example. I'm
right,
not going to compromise with authoritarian communism, right? These are not things that I think are compromisable positions. They're
right,
not in good faith. And
yeah,
so at the end of the day, right, there are positions of respectability. But again, the problem is with good faith, with respectability, they are perspectival. Now, one of the things that does end up happening, while very rare, politics can create sometimes these this or that situations. There are plenty of spectival positions, and they exist more often than not. But oftentimes, politics does put people at a head, right? Was the election stolen? Was it not? Were the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers faked or not, right?
right.
And we can go on and
But
on
we
with
also have
examples.
to like also it's just like an overwhelming. It's not even just that. Like it literally continues every single day to this day, right?
Right.
Where
So, but that's where
every
the
single this is the thing. This is the justification of literally everything that Donald Trump does now. It's not just whether or not the election was stolen. Well, he's now saying, okay, deep state, we're gonna say that these fucking numbers that like came from the economics were fucking false because of the deep state. Like we can't fucking ignore this. We
yeah.
can't. Like
Right.
there's no everything he's doing right now is being justified by the same fucking conspiracy theory that fucking got us here. So you can't just fucking ignore the fact that like, it's just like and I'm not getting mad at you. I'm
No, I
just
know you're
like
not. I know it's not at me in particular. But this is the thing, right? This coming together is very difficult when, you are provided with two options, right? And individuals pick options that have no correlation between one another, right? We can argue at what point something, becomes tall versus it's short, right? There's some spectrum. There's actually something to speak about. But when it comes to things that are this or that, you can't just say, well, he kind of stole an election or he sort of fired the BLS manager. It's like no, like this is not one of those. And the problem is, and this is something you're pointing to, maybe implicitly, maybe explicitly, is that Trump is very good at creating this sort of politics without spectrum, right? You're either with me or against me politics.
right,
And that's because he's a fascist, right? This is what fascists do. Fascists play the politics of with me or against me. I mean, amongst many things, but this is one of the things that fascists are very skilled at. And so it is one of these things where at a time, right, to combat fascism, right, you want unity. And this is where, Germany failed, for example. The communist parties and the social democratic parties failed to come together to, hold any opposition to the National Socialists, right? As, one of many things, right? And it was a failure for a variety of reasons, right? Like there was social democratic violence on communists. Then, when the social democrats reached out later, the communists were still mad about earlier violence. So, there was these sort of things, that got in the way. But what we are at right now is, and you're completely right. As long as the head honcho, or at least it keeps on spewing these this or that politics, the more individuals have to take this and not this or that positions, the more it becomes, oh shoot, well this is the case, that is the case, and when you have no space to talk, to agree, right? When those spaces, those third places get kind of drawn away, where do we go? And
Right.
you mentioned something earlier about, can we not watch the same news and, like, have some common understandings? And I think even more so than that, right? I think you talk to the majority of individuals, right? And I say the majority of individuals, left or right, need be, not need be. And you speak to them and they're like, yeah, man, like, I don't want people to suffer. I don't want people to have bad lives. And I do think the vast majority of people are of average morals. They're just like, yeah, man, like, they're not kumbaya necessarily, but they're also not like monsters by any means.
Right.
And so what we end up with, right, is, I think, again, kind of a politics of humanizing, right, could help in some sense, because it's like, hey, whoa, 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 why are we talking about, like, you know these sort of like vague experiences of deep states? Why are we focusing on the sense of freedom and greatness, right? Like,
Right.
let's talk
Well,
about the
so
fact that, I just wanted to
yeah.
share this one stat very quickly. In the United States, at highest, the average life expectancy for Black trans women is 49. At lowest, it is 35, right? And so the fact that there are individuals in the country so marginalized to the point where 35 to 49 is the average life expectancy in the United States is abhorrent. And we could
Right.
point to many injustices. If we focus on a politics of, wait a sec, like, why are there homeless people? Are individuals with disabilities being helped out? Why are there populations whose life expectancy is as low as 35? Like, that's the thing. But no, we get caught up in, oh, well, like, what is a woman? It's like, okay, yeah, this is a valid and important question, not to be dismissed, but, like, what a woman is, no matter what they end up being and how that affects them to very serious degrees, maybe we should help out that person no matter what. And part of helping out individuals is understanding their situation. It's not just dismiss the question, what is a woman? It's like, no, like, let's actually understand how people exist in the world, understand the humans by which they are. And to be quite, frank, and the actual last point, I tangented again a little bit, my apologies,
That's
is
good.
Trump can be a quite dehumanizing political figure, and this style of politics has definitely, like, pervaded more heavily than it has in other eras recently. Not that we're at the peak of dehumanization with Trump, but he doesn't help.
Yeah. No, all right. So I want to rewind a little bit. Like, so right before like Trump got elected, um, see, this is what I was saying earlier. So I do think that there is definitely like still a spectrum of the Trump, people who voted for Trump who like I don't inherently disagree with as people, right? Like where I feel like, it's like to some degree, like Joe Rogan is an example, right? Like I don't love everything he says, but like I don't like villainize him, right? Like I think like overall, like he's somebody that like I could see myself getting along with, right? Even though I disagree with him on a lot of things. Um, yet, the thing that like I just wish that we as a society could acknowledge that like there's no way that there's not some form of gaslighting, and by gaslighting, really, it's propaganda that's
Yeah.
happening. When you look at like what happened in our last election, right? Like right before Trump got elected, no matter how you look at it, we had two entirely different narratives, right? Like there was like Trump, obviously liberals painted him as like Hitler, etc. And then you have, people that are conservatives who paint Kamala. I think communist was like the most like,
Well,
or
there's
like,
also the literal AI image that Trump posted of
yeah,
like
yeah. There, I
Kamala
did
leading
see
a
that with
communist rally.
Kamala as like in the Russian outfit or whatever. But like so, there's no way to like I just like, are we not at the point where we can just mutually agree that like there's no way that like propaganda is not happening, whether you think that like the other side is falling for the
Yeah.
propaganda? Like this should be a bipart like a
And
nonpartisan
AI is
fucking
only
belief.
perpetuating it. AI is
Right.
only increasing the frequency and forms of propaganda. So, like, not only is there propaganda, it's only going to increase and get worse.
But once we can agree, right, like there is propaganda, we probably should be like kind of focused on what is the source of that propaganda, right? Like we need to understand that to understand like what's going on in our, society right now. So it's like I mean, I think a very prevalent like contributor is fucking Elon Musk, because like he literally paid $44 billion for Twitter, which like he's just turning into a propaganda machine. Like when you but like this is, it's just a very orchestrated political attack, in my opinion. Like I look at like things that he's posted, and like whether they're like in the context of talking about like the UK or whatever, but he's very clearly stating like civil war is inevitable. He's like trying to declare war on liberals, right? Like that's his like mo, and like he has kind of nodded to this more than a dozen times, right? It's not once, it's not a fluke. And like the stupid like Nazi salute, people can argue about all that, like but it doesn't change the fact that like everything he actually posts is like he's very clearly trying to promote kind of like a white like superior race in Africa. Like these things are just like obvious if you just watch the words that come out of his mouth.
But notice what it's doing, right? And we can go, okay, the British Empire was the source of propaganda in India. Okay, got it. We have the source. But what it's doing is dividing and conquering, right? We can
Right.
see divide
Because
and
I'm
conquer happen all the
focusing on
time.
Elon Musk, and people have like somehow kind of, they have like whatever, what's the word? You ever see Twilight where like they imprint like like Jacob or whatever imprints himself on like the daughter of Bella or some shit? I don't know. But like yeah, I just feel like people like they stick to like celebrities sometimes, where like they're just like, this is my celebrity, I like them. It's a
Sure.
parasocial relationship, I think, but it's just
Yeah, but
like,
like but that points to something, right? Like there is something in pointing to the source, right? And certainly sources should be called out. But one of the things you're saying is that like, okay, yeah, we may all agree we're being propagandized, but through the divide and conquer strategy, there's a couple things that happen where it's like people don't notice the ways that they themselves are being propagandized, but may see somebody else as being propagandized or see somebody else as receiving propaganda, right? This
right.
is one of the ways in which we are all illiterate, right? I don't like to make fun of illiteracy. Like, no, this is just something that's part of just being a human. We just have certain things we're not as good at reading. And so, we could say, yes, we all agree, we're all being propagandized. Okay, but then who's doing the propaganda? It's the DNC, it's Fox News, right.
Right.
So this is what ends up happening. The divide and conquer works very well. And again, we can point to the source of money, right? Through an individual like Elon Musk as a good example, even if he's representative of a larger group of interested capitalist propagandists. And so I don't think humanization is like the end all be all answer, but I think it's one of those things where it's not just about being propagandized. That once one understands that they themselves are propagandized to, then go, okay, well, somebody else is also being, and like I should sympathize with that, right? Or empathize with that, and
Right. And
kind of
that was
spread that
like kind of the
around.
thing that I was trying to get at. And like I can acknowledge my bias in that like response.
Heck
Um
yeah.
but like but I just wish that like but here's the thing, like I do view that viewpoint, but at the same time I do also hold the belief that like I can understand like somebody believing something differently. I'm not exactly a Buddhist, but like I do like kind of understand this perspective of like I feel like all people are like kind of I mean, I'm kind of a determinist, really. Like, I kind of believe that like we're all like in some level like kind of computers, and you feed us some certain input, we're always going to give you the same output. But because there's such a fucking like infinite like number of combinations of input that you can get, nobody realizes that. So it's just like we all seem to have different outputs, but I think that like I genuinely believe that, but like I mean like it's a philosophical kind of tangent.
Oh no, you're going to talk to a philosophy professor about
I
a
mean, you can tell me how
philosophical
dumb I
tangent.
am. Let's go.
No, no, I mean, no, I can't prove or disprove it, right? Like, I'm personally a compatibilist, which is basically, that there's some level of determinism, some level of free will. What
Right.
exactly is what? I cannot tell you. The reasons I argue for determinism are like very much based upon this notion of thrownness from Heidegger, in the sense that we're thrown into the world, right? We didn't pick our country, we didn't pick our parents, we didn't
Right.
pick our gene, right, right? There's lots of things we came into the world not picking. However, even in that, there appears to be, right, the ability to do otherwise to certain extents. Not every extent, right? I can't like, defy the laws of gravity. However, there are certain social choices I could make, right? I can make the choice between this food, that food, right? So there seems to be a combination, at least for me,
Right.
but I can't prove it or disprove it. It's one of those questions, as Zhuangzi points out with morality, but I'll extrapolate it onto the
Right.
question of free will. It's like, where is the measuring stick?
Right.
Where is the scale? How could we build one?
Right. Well, I mean, honestly, like, I mean, like, I'm gonna give you a really simplified and like kind of like common sense answer, but like my like kind of defense and like why I believe that like determinism is a thing is more like neurological, which is just like um if you put a hole in the right spot in the brain, you're gonna function differently. And like that's physical, right? Like it's just like it's literally all just like these are the little buttons that like that these are the little circuits that
Yeah,
have
the
to come
Phineas
together to
Gage
create you. And
sort
it's
of
just like,
thing.
if you go back to like fucking like Phineas Gage or whatever the
Yep.
fuck, like, it's just like like I there are like some disputes for that whole like methodology, but at the same time it's just like there's still like there's a level of like if you modify the brain in any way and that like modifies you, I don't understand how you can like really fully embrace that like you are 100% accountable for your
Oh no,
like
I'm not a
free
radical free
will.
will person. I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
think the Sartrean position of radical free will is absolutely absurd, or at least the way it's translated. But he doesn't help himself out. Yeah, the
Right.
idea that we have all the free will, I think, is nonsense, because clearly there is so much in our lives that is determinate, right? Again, didn't pick where we were born. Don't we don't pick how, like, if a metal pole goes through our brain, how that's going to change us, but it certainly will. Now, this would again, be to say though that that Phineas Gage has no free will prior or post getting the metal pole through his head, and like I don't think that's something we can outright say either, right? Like clearly, to me, uh, you know,
Well, so this is the thing though, is like I just feel like with that particular thing that you said, it's just like where did the fucking pole lodge, right? Like maybe if the pole like moved a couple centimeters, you wouldn't be saying that, right? So that's the problem, I think. It like because like we're just like arbitrarily picking a position where that
no, no,
pole
no. I'm
went
not
through the brain.
arbitrarily picking a position. What I'm saying is like
Well,
no
no, no, no.
matter.
Like physics arbitrarily picked a position to where that pole entered his brain. Like otherwise, it could have hit any other area, and maybe his free will would have been 100% gone, right? Like I don't know. Like
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are moments where it's like obviously he could have died. That would have certainly knocked out free will. There could have been different. Again, I am not a neurophysicist, nor a neuropsychologist or anything of the sort. But obviously, different epicenters of the brain getting hit are going to have different effects. So to me, the argument rests more, and this is to extremely simplify it, right? Let's just say, Phineas Gage had taken a longer time to get his like lunch order that day, right? Because he was more particular on the food item he wanted, and maybe decides to pick a food item that takes a little bit longer to have.
Right.
Then that could, change how the pole went into his brain. So ultimately, the way I see it is that we have, activities in which we make choice, right, through phenomenological experience, right? We experience choice, we feel choice, we act out of choice. Now, could this be entirely illusory? Maybe, but we can't fully disprove it either. So to say that we have 100% free will, absurd. All of our free choices are made in an environment, are made in a context, are made, in response. But it also doesn't seem that like we're inherently tied to respond in one way. It doesn't seem that like we have no options, no choice, no ability. And that's through the logical sense of being able to do otherwise and the experience of being able to do otherwise. The experience of reminiscing on prior options may also help on this sort of front. So there's the sort of the logical, the experiential, and the psychological ways in which we may have some freedom of will, but I don't know how much it is, and I definitely lean heavier towards the determinate side of compatibilism than the will based. I think our wills are a lot more limited than many people would like to admit, but I don't think there's absolutely none.
Right. All right. I have three questions I want to ask you,
Great.
and
Happy to
then
answer.
we can wrap this up. All
Oh,
right.
thank you for having me on, by the way, already.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. I would definitely love to get you on again. I would definitely love to chat again. We can work that out some other day. But all right, so three questions, and then we can wrap this up. And I'll throw you all of them at the same time because yeah, I do know like you kind of also you kind of study religion as well, right?
Hmm.
So you're kind of versed in that much more than I am because I don't really care very much about the little like details. But like, all right, three questions. Was Jesus real? Was he born on December or in December? We'll go with December. And then was he white? Go.
Okay, so I'm one of the minority opinions on this. I do think that there is a real person of Jesus
I don't
Christ.
think that's a minority, but yeah, go on.
It is
I've
amongst
heard that from
historians now,
historians.
amongst modern, maybe not like all of history historians, but among the majority of present historians, I hold the minority view that like he was a real coherent person.
Right. And
But
just to
was he?
clarify, like, I mean, like, my belief, I don't want to speak for your belief, but like, I mean, I do believe Jesus was real, but I don't believe he was like, a benevolent, divine person. Like, I'm not
Yeah,
speaking
yeah,
for
I
you.
think I think he was a historical figure. And I think oftentimes stances on religion could be very exaggerated, right? Like assuming an entire religion is genocidal in nature, as like, which happens a lot with people when they talk about Islam. So, I am someone who is agnostic personally, but I have a lot of respect and interest in religion while trying to be honest about like the variations of positions that exist.
Right.
However, right, the stances I make are from like a religious studies perspective. So, in terms of the personage of Jesus being born on December, no, right? We have pretty decently documented history that Jesus's birthday was placed in December to replace the holiday of Saturnalia, the Roman holiday of Saturnalia. And so the big Roman festival was a winter festival where there was a role reversal, and the Catholic Church realized, well, we need to have replacement holidays because, we can't just not. We got to give people something to celebrate. So, no, the December birthday is a, product of like, historical spreading of the faith. Um, The third question I completely forgot. I apologize.
Was he white?
Oh, hell no. Nothing wrong with white guys. I myself am one, but like,
Well, so I've heard like
hell.
the thing is like I also like I'm in the rap battle community. There's a lot of black people, so like there are some people that are like oh Jesus was black. I don't think he was black either. I think he was just like
I don't,
he
to
was
me, it's not,
in the
he could have
Middle
been, who
East, right? He
cares?
would have been like that fair, that like darker skin tone, right? Brown, right? Like
If he was, again, if I'm wrong and he happens to be blanquito, if he happens to be mulatto, happens to be a black guy, like so be it. To me, I say hell no, just because the statistical genetic likelihood of it. Was it completely impossible given the fact that Roman Empire and
he
someone
also
from a
had
different part of the
blue eyes and
empire?
like blondish
Yeah,
hair.
that's even more
Like
unlikely. But
some of them have. Sometimes he has brown hair. It depends on the depiction,
yeah,
but.
brown hair, brown-eyed, white Jesus. Just given the cultural statistical demographics, that's more likely than blonde Jesus for sure. But again, there are other also admixtures that are also more likely. But to me, I think the way I like to view Jesus, even as a historical, person, is someone whose message was important enough to change the entire moral system of the Roman Empire and thus the moral system of Europe. I very much like Nietzsche's takes on Jesus, because if you read Nietzsche, he's very much interested in Christ. He's not like, haha, stupid myth is stupid. He thinks of Christianity through its psychology, through the types of beliefs it creates. And to me, that's the interesting part about religion, not to go, new atheist debunking style, like, haha, stupid Quran quote is stupid. It's like, no, let's take an interest in how, Islam, kind of, instantiates a psychological type that is dedicated, that's consistent. Islam has various definitions on charity, which include a sense of required charity and charity that you personally want to do. So to me, that's the interesting part of religion, like the ideas that it helped formulate and how they can have interest both within and outside of a given faith, including interesting ideas such as, sort of Hotep ideas of Jesus.
Right, right, right. So I guess while you're mentioning Nietzsche, like, do you mind how long you got? I don't want to keep you going.
No, no, you can keep me for a little
All
longer.
right. So like talking about Nietzsche a little bit. I'm not like super well versed on philosophy, but I was listening actually to a podcast which Nietzsche I associate with like nihilism, kind of just like understanding that like I mean like when I really think about nihilism myself, I think about like I personally genuinely believe that the universe is like going to outlive humans by like billions and billions or trillions of years, right? Like it's like humans are just like a blip in the fucking like lifetime of the universe. So at the end of the day, I think anything that we as humans can do, I could be Elon Musk. I could make $1 trillion or whatever. But like it's still gonna eventually fade away. Like whether you're talking about like 1 trillion years from now or two trillion years from now, if we're talking about infinity, like I really don't think that like your like your importance as a human is going to ever really outlast that. Um, but that's kind of how I like what I think about as like nihilism. It's like, well, if that's the truth, then why do anything, right? Like, why even get up at in the morning and fucking like do anything if I just know that like everything I do is literally for nothing. But like, so I was listening to a podcast actually. I think it might have been earlier today where have you ever heard of Dr. K? He's like healthy gamer. I don't know.
I've heard of him, but I
Yeah.
have not really watched any content by
Yeah.
him.
He's a psychiatrist. I enjoy him. He's a very like insightful human in my opinion. But like, he has a podcast where he kind of talks about how he believes that like like it's fine to have nihilism as like a a philosophical belief or like whatever, but it's like at the same time, like when you actually take nihilism and you put it into a human, then it actually becomes detrimental to like the human, in terms of actually being able to psychologically like live life in a way that feels meaningful and purposeful, it's I guess he like one thing he like stated, I think, as a statistic, was that like like people that like embracing nihilism like indulge in sexual pleasure over purpose, right? Like you don't even like necessarily uh like go for like, oh, this is my meaning in life, I have to like really like fulfill some kind of, you just kind of like indulge more so in like the like endorphins, or even like the oxy or whatever, like the dopamine of like just trying to like pursue porn or something like that. So do you have like any perspective on that? Does that sound like far-fetched, or do you, I don't know, it's like I'm
Let's
throwing thoughts
make
out.
use of probably the most notable anti-nihilist in philosophical history, Friedrich Nietzsche. Now you might be like, wait, what? But Dr. K, I don't know the podcast, but if this is what Dr. K indeed said, he has a common
I don't want to put words in his mouth. I might
misunderstanding
have
of
bastardized
Nietzsche.
it, don't blame me.
No, I'm not. No, 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 no.
No, no, I'm just
He
saying,
could
I'm
have
just
said
putting that
everything
disclaimer
right.
out there. Go off, go off.
Right, but that's why I'm also disclaiming too, where I'm like, I don't know what he said exactly. But what I do know is that this is a common misperception of Nietzsche. Nietzsche's actually extremely life affirming, despite even acknowledging that,
Okay, one tiny little disconnect I wanted to point out. He did say this of nihilism and not necessarily Nietzsche, but yeah, yeah, yeah. Go on.
yeah. That being said, though, right, Nietzsche's association with nihilism nonetheless, like, still holds for many, Dr. K, irregardless. So, in that sort of sense, right, Nietzsche points to this idea of life affirming, and even speaks to that very notion you brought up of like our time and history being short in in the span of the universe. And for Nietzsche, what he talks about is that he cannot appreciate a God who does not dance, right? The only God that he could ever worship is one that dances. And for him, right, it's not about, focusing on, the meaninglessness or the ceaselessness of it all. For Nietzsche, it's like, why does meaning that matter in some sense? He doesn't directly say this. For him, what's more important is will, is acting. He oftentimes points to ways in which animals have benefits. He talks about the cow as a ahistoric creature, right? It does not ruminate while it ruminates. It simply just does its processes. And for Nietzsche, he often thinks about we ourselves needing to just be more affirmative in what we do. Who cares about meaning or meaninglessness, right? This exertion of power, not as in the sense of, oh, I'm going to conquer the world, but power as overcoming struggle, power as overcoming sickness, power as overcoming weakness. And so for him, the affirming thing in life is to still be someone that affirms life in the face of Schopenhauerian pessimism, Buddhist pessimism. So, yeah, for Nietzsche, in some sense, it doesn't create an inherent meaning, but it creates this very personal meaning of no, you can find meaning in giving the middle finger to nihilism.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know how to delve too deep into that. I'm not very informed. I just like, I wrote this down as a note. I was like, interesting thought for me. I think like, I don't know, like I've been like on my own journey of trying to like kind of figure out my purpose in life, right? Like where like, I'm just kind of I'm a thinker, right? Like I'm not much of a reader. I'm not much of like, I'm very much like, I just get into my own head and I think a lot. And so I I've been trying to like, kind of figure out, because I'm also agnostic. And like, so it's like once you're, once you're like, I'm agnostic to the point where like, it's like, I just don't really think about religion at all. And I don't really, like, I don't think about God much. Like, I just like, I try to act as if God doesn't exist, even though like I don't like I'm not claiming he doesn't. I'm just acting as if he doesn't, if that makes sense. And so like I just, I like for example, and this is like kind of like what I feel like is a little bit of a detriment to some people who might be religious is that like, you know, if I'm super religious and I feel like, oh, God's looking out for me, he cares about me, if I'm a little bit narcissistic like that, then like, oh, I'm gonna go to the casino. I'm obviously going to hit it big. I just need to keep playing the slot machines enough times, and then God's going to look out for me, and then He's going to give me a like a couple $1 million payouts or something like that. I've been a good person. I've tried to do everything I could do. I've struggled through like life. God's looking out for me. Whereas me, like I'm agnostic and I very much act as if like there's no such thing as divine intervention, right? You could say God or not, but divine intervention is probably a better term, like where it's just like God is willing to intervene on my behalf to manipulate how the world works. Because without that, probabilities look very different, right? Like you have to look at the world as probabilities, like like when you're born, what is the probability that you're going to be yay high or something else? Like it's just like there's so much like statistics and science built on probabilities, and with God, like all of a sudden those probabilities kind of fall apart, and then it becomes like philosophy.
Well, it's
And
even beyond divine intervention. It's the leap of faith that Kierkegaard implicitly develops. This sense of that, well, you do not know for sure, but you leap into it, right? Whether you have fear of the infinite or fear of the finite, right? Whether your fears are, I cannot do that much, or your fears are, I have too many options. Nonetheless, for Kierkegaard, we take a leap of faith. Now, one of the things that that good at addressing is the fact that many leaps of faith can result in consequences that are not to our best interest. But at some point, I don't think Kierkegaard concerns himself with this because, well, it's something that we ought to do, right? We ought to take a leap of faith. And so I think that's one of the things I try to do in some sort of sense is be, in some sense, faithful to decisions. Not that I have to hold on to them forever, but to acknowledge where it's like, well, I may not have all the answers. I may not have the ultimate right answer. I may not have any sort of, inherent meaning, but I still got to act, and I can do so faithfully without full knowledge. I can embrace the fact that life can be quite absurd, while also being like, well, it's not that that doesn't matter, it's that I'm still dancing in the Nietzschean terms.
right. All right. I'm gonna wrap this up here, but no, I really
Finish on that
appreciate.
song and dance. I like how
Yeah,
we
yeah.
opened up on music
On
and
that
finished
song
with
and dance, I
dancing.
like that.
So
That that.
I feel like that's a nice bow.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this,
A hundred
interview.
percent.
Yeah, you're very well versed and like, much more knowledgeable than I am. So I just like really get to like I like to be able to pick your brains a little bit. But
Thank you, thank you.
yeah, all right. Hope you have a good night, bro.
You have a great night, sir.
All right, see ya.